On January 1st, 2009, Tennessee Harvester Corporation issued debenture bonds that pay interest semi-annually on June 30th and December 31st. Portions of the bond amortization schedule appear below. Requirement 1 asks us what is the face amount of the bonds. And if you look to the far right column, outstanding balance, you see that the bonds, the outstanding balance, is growing over time. And at the end of the bond period, the 40th payment, we see that the outstanding balance grows to $7 million. This tells us that we've had a bond discount, and over time we're amortizing the discount, and eventually we're leading up to the bond's face amount. $7 million is the face amount of the bonds. The second requirement says, what is the initial selling price of the bonds? And if we look at the partial amortization schedule, what we do is we go to the outstanding balance for period 0, and we see that the initial selling price of the bonds was $5,505,145. Requirement 3 asks, what is the term to maturity in years? Well, if we look to the bottom of the amortization schedule, we see that there are 40 payments and interest is paid semi-annually. So 40 divided by 2 tells us that the term to maturity in years is 20 years. Requirement 4 asks, interest is determined by what approach? And if we look to the amortization table, we see one column is labeled effective interest, so that's our first hint. But if you look at the dollar amounts appearing in effective interest, you see that they're not constant. They grow more and more each period. Now, if we were using the straight line interest method, we would see that the interest amount would be the same amount in every column. Since that isn't the case, we can conclude that we're using the effective interest approach. Requirement 5 asks, what is the stated annual interest rate? Well, if we look at the cash interest payment, we see it's $175,000. If we take $175,000 and divide it by the bond's face value of $7 million, we come up with the semi-annual interest payment. So once we do that, we can multiply it times 2. We come up with a 5% stated annual interest rate. Requirement 6 asks, what is the effective annual interest rate? And to come up with that, we take the first payment, which is the first interest amount, $192,680, and we divide it by the outstanding balance, and that comes up with the periodic rate. Since interest is paid semi-annually, we multiply that amount times 2, and the result is a 7% effective annual interest rate. Requirement 7 asks, what is the total interest paid over the term to maturity? Well, here if we look, we see that we're paying cash interest of $175,000 40 times. $175,000 times 40 comes out to be $7 million, and that's the answer to requirement 7. Requirement 8 asks, what is the total effective interest expense recorded over the term to maturity? Okay, to solve this one, what we do is we take the total cash interest plus the discount. So we know there was cash interest of $175,000 times 40 periods. That gives us $7 million. And then we add in the difference between the $7 million face value that we see in the far bottom column for period 40 and the original outstanding balance. And that difference represents the interest of the discount that we need to subtract from the $7 million, or excuse me, add to the $7 million. And that difference brings the total total interest to $8,494,855.